In this video, we're going to be talking about every UFC fighter's biggest weakness. I obviously can't cover every single UFC fighter, so I'm going to cover as many as I can in this video. And let's start with Alexander Volkanovski. He just won his title recently after losing it a year before. And before he won his title, the conversation was that he may have a crazy downfall. He's lost 2 fights in a row. He may never be the same again, and that's because he suffered 2 horrible knockout losses. The conversation was Volkanovski's chin may never be the same, and I think that is still his biggest weakness. Because we did see in the Diego Lopez fight, the only area he struggled against Diego Lopez for the most part was getting hit with those power punches. For a guy like Alexander Volkanovski, who's practically the most well-rounded fighter of all time, the biggest weakness isn't in his skill set, but he's pushing 40, and I think it's his chin. I think the biggest weakness is still his wrestling, right? That was the obvious weakness of Alex Pereira, since he's even debuted in the UFC. But after the Magomed Ankalaev fight, he stuffed every single takedown. But I don't think that proves that that still isn't his biggest weakness. Because with the level of striking Alex Pereira has, even though his wrestling looked good against Magomed Ankalaev, I do not think it's better than his striking or better than any other skill he has. And therefore, I think it's his biggest weakness. Islam Makhachev's next, and Islam Makhachev, just like Volkanovski, is a really hard person to find a weakness for, because I can't say chin. He's not old. He hasn't suffered any knockout loss as of recent, and he has one of the skill sets that are extremely well-rounded. But if I had to choose something about Islam Makhachev's game, I would say the footwork. I don't think Makhachev's footwork, out of everything else, is as good. There's many times when you see him fight, he trips over his own feet, and he kind of gets caught off balance. You saw in the first Volkanovski fight, Volkanovski caught Islam Makhachev, and Makhachev was kind of off balance when he got hit, and that caused him to stumble backwards. Even though it wasn't like a damaging shot that would rock Makhachev, it looked like it because he was just tripping backwards from getting punched when he didn't have his feet really under him that much. And then you look at his most recent fight with Moicano, a similar thing happened. If you guys remember, it looked like he almost got knocked down by Moicano. He was off balance, he was caught off balance, and he just fell straight on his butt. So I think the biggest weakness out of everything, it's a very small detail, but I think it's the footwork of Islam Makhachev. Ilia Topuria is next. And Ilia Topuria, again, I'm going to say this again, one of the hardest guys to pick a weakness for, but I think Ilia Topuria's weakness is the low kick. Just the way he fights, the boxing style, it will be a weakness with that style. Not that he doesn't check leg kicks, not that he is bad at checking leg kicks, but the stance he has makes it a little bit harder for him to check the leg kick and get out of the way of the leg kick. Also, the way that he's very shelled up, it's hard for him to see it. So I think that's the biggest weakness. A lot of people would say the biggest weakness is his wrestling, but I think that comes from people who don't really realize, his background. People like to point out the Bryce Mitchell where he got, taken down by Bryce Mitchell, but I think going up to 155 is going to make his wrestling even better. I think he's going to have a lot more weight under him, and I think stuffing takedowns is going to be no problem. Especially the way he fights, very easy to sprawl right away. He doesn't fight in a very upright kickboxing stance. He fights in the exact opposite way, and I think that's great for takedown defense. So I wouldn't say his wrestling's his biggest weakness. I would say it's the low kick. Arman Tsarukyan's next. And Arman Tsarukyan's biggest weakness, I would say, is the striking. It's not a huge weakness. A lot of these guys don't have huge weaknesses because they're at such high level. But compared to the other lightweights in his division, I don't think his striking is at the same level. I don't think he has Dustin Poirier level striking, or Islam Makhachev level striking, or Charles Oliveira level striking, Max Holloway, or Ilia Topuria. I don't think he's up there with the top strikers. And it's mostly because, against some of the guys like Oliveira, he does not have the size, he does not have the length to be able to land that easily on them. But just because you don't have the reach doesn't mean you're a worse striker. You see that with Ilia Topuria. Ilia Topuria is very short, yet he's the most dangerous striker in the UFC. But Arman Tsarukyan doesn't have the striking Ilia Topuria has. He does not have that crisp, devastating knockout power and crisp combinations like Ilia Topuria has. It's a little bit more average than that. He does have good power, but compared to the rest of the fighters, I don't think he poses anything special in the striking. Paddy Pimblett's next, and this one is the easiest one. It's his striking. That's the only reason why I think a lot of people don't think Pimblett could be champion, because Pimblett's wrestling and his jiu-jitsu is really good. That's what makes him such a high-level fighter, in my opinion. That's the reason he beat Michael Chandler, because his game plan was perfect in that fight. He kept distance. He didn't engage with Chandler's crazy brawling, and he tired Chandler out, and he took him down. Chandler took him down too, but he weathered the storm, and he used his size to his advantage. But we've seen his striking before, and not too long ago, it did not look good. look back at the Tony Ferguson fight. That does not look like top level striking. And with that kind of striking, if he hasn't improved since then, he might have, but if he hasn't improved vastly since then, he's going to run into trouble with, you know, a guy like Holloway. But the reason why he is a top level lightweight is because a guy like Holloway, he could take down and use his size against Holloway and beat him that way. But when you're talking about a guy like Islam Makhachev, who has better grappling than Paddy Pimblett and better striking, his striking is going to be a massive weakness. It is. Khamzat Chimaev's next. Khamzat Chimaev's biggest weakness, I would have to say, is his gas tank. And a lot of people say he does not have cardio issues. It was just a bad game plan in the Gilbert Burns fight. He broke his hand against KAMARU Usman. I get all that stuff. Those are perfectly fine excuses. But just the way he fights shows you that he cannot keep that up for the entire fight. You cannot go as hard as Khamzat Chimaev goes and keep that pace for the entire fight. Everybody who has those quick early finisher type fight styles who just go all out at you, gas out at some point. He's not a MERAB Dvalishvili who can just go full blast for 5 rounds straight. The only person who can do that is MERAB. And Khamzat Chimaev, we all know, comes at you like a madman. And if he does that against Du Plessis, who's his next opponent, and DRICUS can withstand the storm, then we might see some cardio issues from Khamzat Chimaev. But DRICUS Du Plessis next. And the biggest weakness of DDP, I'm going to say it, is his unorthodox striking. Not even just striking, his just unorthodox style. Because I know a lot of people say he makes it work, which he does, but there are going to be some people who it will not work against. And I think a guy like that could be Khamzat Chimaev. Another guy could be Alex Pereira if DDP went up and fought Pereira for some reason. A guy like Pereira, I don't think that unorthodox striking would work against. And I don't know if it will work against Khamzat Chimaev. We'll have to wait and see. But Jon Jones is next. And the biggest weakness of Jon Jones, a pretty obvious one too by most people, is the boxing. Right? If you had to pick one thing about Jon Jones, one of the most well-rounded fighters in the UFC, the clear thing that isn't on the same level as everything else that he has is his boxing. Look at his Stipe Miocic fight. Look at his Dominic Reyes fight. His boxing just is not fluid as much as like a guy like ILIA TOPURIA. You don't really see Jones throwing slick boxing combinations. His style is more of like a pick and prod from distance, Muay Thai type of style because he's such a rangy guy. So I would say that's the biggest weakness about Jon Jones. Tom Aspinall's next though, and the biggest weakness of Tom Aspinall is his experience. That's really the only thing I can say because his wrestling is so good, his jiu-jitsu is so good, his boxing and kickboxing is great. All of his fights, he has the shortest average fight time of any fighter in the UFC. He has not gone, into championship round. He has not experienced what it's like. If you fought a guy like Jon Jones who was able to withstand the storm, what it's like to fight in the 5th round or in the 4th round. I would say a close second would be Tom Aspinall's chin. Not because he's chinny, but he just floats his chin up in the air, and it's pretty risky the way he fights like that. But Belal Muhammad's next. And the biggest weakness with Belal Muhammad we just saw in his last fight against JDM is the striking again, right? He doesn't have horrible striking, but against a guy like JDM who's way more clean and crispy with his combinations, he kind of got exposed in that department, which we all kind of knew Belal's striking isn't the best, but JDM really proved that a high-level striker who can fight off the back foot and deal with pressure, a guy that's not like Leon Edwards, can really expose Belal Muhammad's striking. KAMARU Usman's next. And the biggest weakness with KAMARU Usman is his age. I don't think his knees actually work. And it doesn't really seem like KAMARU Usman is that mobile. Like, it's that bad. I really think it's that bad. I don't know if his knees will be able to handle another MMA fight. And in his next performance against Joaquin Buckley, he's going to have to deal with that. And the guy's pushing 40 years old. I think he's too old to be a top level fighter. He could prove me wrong, but a welterweight that's pushing 40, it's very rare to, be in the title contention, especially after a three fight losing streak. Sean O'Malley's next. Sean O'Malley's biggest weakness is his physicality. I'm not even going to say wrestling because he actually has pretty good wrestling defense. He's very stringy. He can kind of wiggle his way out of single legs and stuff like that. But the big thing that I see, especially in the MERAB fight, because that's how he lost, was the wrestling. It just looked like MERAB just outstrengthed him. Like, he just took O'Malley down and looked like he was clearly way stronger. I think Sean O'Malley talked about it himself as well. He said, MERAB just felt like stronger than me. And that was a big issue because I just could not defend the takedowns. So I think the biggest weakness with Sean O'Malley, considering he's one of the tallest, he's like 5'11", and he's a bantamweight, he's not going to have much muscle. But lastly, we have MERAB. And the biggest weakness with MERAB is the striking. It's kind of similar to you know, Belal Muhammad, where it's like Belal Muhammad has great pressure, he has great wrestling, and a lot of people can't strike off the back foot. So that style can really dominate most people. And same thing with MERAB, but MERAB takes it to another level. He has next level cardio, next level wrestling, and a lot of people can't land a damaging shot before they get taken down and held down. And I think that's a big reason why MERAB has so much success. But until there's a guy that can strike off their back foot and have knockout power against a guy like MERAB's just going to take over. And I think the only guy to do that probably is Sean O'Malley, because we know O'Malley can strike off the back foot and he has knockout power. He knocked out Aljamain Sterling off the back foot. That's why the rematch, you know, could go either way, because Sean O'Malley, yes, he has weaknesses with the takedowns. He's not as strong as MERAB, but he can knock out MERAB at any moment. And I think that's why that fight's pretty close. And I think that's MERAB's biggest weakness, is the striking. So that's every fighter I'm going to cover in this video. Let me know what you guys think. Are there any weaknesses that I missed? If I did, let me know in the comments below. I'll see you guys in the next one.